I do love a good rhythm game, but despite its popularity, I can't say I've ever had too much affinity with the hit the note as it hits the bar kind of style. I like variety and pizzazz to complement my rhythmic grooves, like with Rhythm Heaven or Crypto the Necrodancer, but because of this, I'm not too familiar with the king of the rhythm games, Dance Dance Revolution. Well, other than the occasional bout of Bye Bye Baby Balloon at the arcade like any sane human being. But I knew the day would come when I'd have to properly give one of the home games a chance. After all, that's what crossovers are for, are they not? Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix was developed by Hudson Soft and Konami in 2005 for the Nintendo GameCube. Notably, it was the first DDR game released on a Nintendo console. Well, in the West at least. In Japan, that honor goes to DDR Disney Dancing Museum on the Nintendo 64 of all things. I think I picked the wrong game to look at, cause now I am so curious as to how that one works out. Anyway, it's known for being the entry point to the franchise as a whole for many a DDR aficionado, so what better place to start? If you've never heard of DDR before and are unfamiliar with how it plays, firstly, I'm impressed. But more importantly, it's quite simple stuff in theory. The game is typically played on a special platform, and in the case of at-home versions, you'll most likely get a more portable and way cheaper soft pad. You have 4 arrow panels in each direction, and as said arrows make their way on the bar on screen, you have to step on the corresponding panel, usually to the beat of the music. It's easy to understand, which is great, however, like most things, the skill ceiling is far higher than some might realize. I, for one, cannot fathom how the harder difficulties are played without tripping over your own legs. Thankfully, you can absolutely just use a controller instead, though some would understandably argue you're missing the point of DDR if you do. All but a handful of the songs are remixes of songs throughout Mario's history. We've got some classics like the ground themes from Super Mario Bros. 3 and World, and on the other end of the spectrum some real oddball choices like Miss Mao's theme from Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, or the title theme from Mario Kart 64. Makes for a rather exciting go through the story because you really have no idea what's coming up next. The non-Mario songs are all remixed classical pieces such as Carmen or even Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, so it's a rather eclectic collection at the end of the day. I was thinking the whole time while playing that the game felt like a GameCube Mario Party game turned into a DDR one, and it turns out I wasn't off the mark. According to the Mario Wiki, it uses pretty much the same engine, amongst all the obvious animations, graphics and stuff. So there's a fun fact to sink your teeth into. Also according to the wiki, this is apparently the only game that features Waluigi and not Peach. That's not gonna win your tavern trivia team any points, but I mean... Actually no, that's a pretty useless fact. Carry on. In a frankly shocking twist of events, Mario Mix manages to have more story going on than many mainline Mario titles. That by no means means it's any good, of course, but it's just a surprisingly hefty chunk of dialogue and doesn't involve Bowser kidnapping Peach, which is a pretty great start. The story begins when a mysterious Waluigi-shaped figure breaks into Truffle Towers, releasing 4 magical music keys into the world. A terrible tragedy, I'm sure. Mario or Luigi, I chose Luigi because he has a better artisan donut recipe, are roused to action by Toad, who informs them of the terrible events befalling the Mushroom Kingdom. The music keys have been stolen and the world is plunged into musical disarray. Or something. Honestly, Toad is pretty vague on the details, but he mentions that everything is feeling like dancing and that if we don't save the day, we'll be stuck doing a dorky dance or something. He also implies that it sounds fun. It's like the classic Super Mario Bros. 3 episode, Do the Koopa, except with very confusing stakes. But of course, if Luigi hears that he can save the day, it doesn't really matter if it makes sense or not, you know he's gonna be there. Immediately, they are stopped by the first obstacle of many, a river. Toad, however, remembers a convenient rhyme that hints at dancing being the solution to all of life's problems, so suggests that they dance here to cross the river in a boat. And if you're wondering how a boat is powered by dance rather than simply rowing it, just look at these moves, Luigi's jamming! They cross the river, climb some vines, escape some pipework, and whack some Goombas, and eventually they're ready to storm Truffle Towers. And as they bust in through the front door, they come across Waluigi himself, who is hanging around the scene of the crime like an absolute numpty. Drunk with power, Though I'm still not quite sure what power we're talking here, he clearly thinks he's the bee's knees and challenges Luigi to a dance-off for the key. A challenge Waluigi easily loses, which begs the question what he used the key for in the first place, because it certainly wasn't a wish for dancing skills. But with the first key recovered, Toad and Luigi hop on the SS Brass and continue the hunt. In World 2, they are intercepted by a whirlwind that crashes them into a hotel, making it turn into a corkscrew. I'd chalk it up to poor structural design personally, but Toadette is quick to not question the fact that her building can turn into a corkscrew and starts pointing fingers. But there's no need to fear, as Toad comes up with a brilliant solution to solve the problem through dance. So with some funky fresh motions, the hotel flies up into the sky and collapses in on itself to become normal. Again, poor structural design getting ignored here, but Toadette is happy enough to let us leave. And with the threat of being local menaces subsided, the journey continues. They avoid a whirlpool, battle a pirate Lakitu for a machine part, and then decide to dive into that same whirlpool under the strong logic of keys have something to do with storms. They get through the whirlpool, find an underwater temple, and out-boogie a giant blooper. Second key retrieved. Now with 2 keys under their belt, the pair moves on their search to World 3, which is an amusement park for some reason. Thinking they have protagonist privilege, they try to barge in without a ticket before 2 Hammer Brothers come and tell them that's not how theme parks work. Having shamed security for not being the main character, they spot Wario holding the 3rd key while riding a roller coaster, and Toad, ever the genius, implores Luigi to give chase by riding the roller coaster. Seems kinda counterintuitive because, Luigi would have had to have waited for Wario to be done to hop on himself. Doesn't really seem like a well thought out plan. And lo and behold, it achieved squat diddly, which is why we continue forth to a haunted house to be harassed by Booze, and then by a chain chomp, but eventually, we finally confront the man himself. Wario reveals his big plan for the key, that is being that he wants to create Dance Dance Revolution Wario Mix. Which by his description sounds like a cracker of a time, I gotta say. Luigi and Toad, however, have cast their vote, and declared it cringe. Thus, Wario gracefully offers to put his creative endeavors on hold, if he can get outdanced. He gets outdanced. Finally making it to World 4, our heroes arrive at a snowy mountain, and on the climb, they battle slippery slopes, underground piping, and the cold itself to reach the top. When they do, they find that the key is embedded within a giant Freezy, and politely ask him to give it to them. A request that the Freezy seemingly refuses. His silence speaks louder than words ever could, and in response, Toad suggests murder.
Absolutely wonderful!
And just like that, they finally have the final key. The ends do justify the means. They return home, and Toad declares he's going on ahead. But when Luigi arrives, he finds Toad knocked to the ground and someone having stolen the keys. Bowser proudly appears and claims ownership over the crime, and flies away. The horror of it all! Fun side note, I love how if you don't know what a musical key is, it just sounds like Bowser stole the keys to the front door, just to be a nuisance. Solid unintentional comedy right there. The heroes give immediate chase, and with zero effort on anyone's part, completely succeed at stealing them back. But Luigi isn't done. There's no glory in stealth after all. So he and Bowser have a dance-off. One-on-one, no backup dancers, pure skill. But of course our hero brings rockets anyway, and beats Bowser up physically, instead of just wounding his dancing reputation, which would have been the fair thing to do. Bowser, having lost everything in an unfair fight, laments his loss and reveals that with the power of the keys, he was going to fix his tone deafness.
Uh-oh.
What an absolute lemon. But seriously, it sounds like Bowser wasn't going to do anything bad at all. He went about it the wrong way, sure, but theoretically it wouldn't have hurt to just let him do his stuff and then return the keys, right? Still, Luigi, realizing that no one else is going to abuse the power of the keys, takes them and in a moment of megalomania, decides to redecorate Bowser's castle and its surrounds as punishment for Bowser's stupidity in crossing him. Everyone then feels compelled to dance. Now, call me a nitpicky Neris, but is this not what we were trying to prevent in the first place? Were not the keys being missing the cause of everyone feeling like dancing? Was this not the whole point of the entire journey? Is Luigi not a greater villain, if not the only real threat, in the whole place? And then the credits roll, with everyone doomed to a Mushroom Kingdom filled with the power of dance. The end. Again, it's not good, but it's way more effort than you'd expect for a DDR game. And I gotta say, the writers did a fantastic job in just reveling in the complete nonsense feel of the story. It doesn't go far enough to make it something worth going through per se, but it definitely stops it from being a chore. Once you beat the story mode, you unlock Story EX mode, which is identical except for some stages having new songs. Kinda torn here, cause having to go through the whole story a whole second time to unlock new songs is a real pain, especially since there's no new events or branching paths to make it interesting. But, on the flip side, the story is really only a few hours long, and I am a fool for a good unlockable. Ultimately though, if you want to have access to the whole track list, it's gotta be done. While it looks like there's a bunch of game modes to delve into here, it's all a lot of ritz and glamour with nothing behind the facade. Free play is exactly what it says on the tin, and where you'll be spending the vast majority of your time. The minigame mode is just the free play for the story's minigames, all of which are not really that notable to play on their own. The other options are simply settings, hints, and what have you. So truly your options are story and free play. If you've got someone wanting to play with you, there is a multiplayer mode, though unless you procure a second mat, you'll have to take turns with who's on controller duty. And considering I'd argue the controller is significantly easier to use, it feels a touch unfair. It's essentially just a version of free play you can play at the same time, so calling it a separate mode is a bit of a stretch. Something unique to this game that you might have noticed is that sometimes you can have Mario elements appear on the track as well as the normal steps. These appear in the story mode, but you can also activate them via a feature called Mush Mode. For the most part, they're borderline just the same as normal steps, but with some things to mix them up along the way. Arrow cheap smooth arrows just before you make it to the bar, Spinies will hurt you if you stay stepped on their respective arrows, and Koopas need to be hit twice and can clear out normal arrows if timed right. They give the game a bit more of a Mario kick, if you will. But if you don't like it, you can just turn it off outside of story mode and they'll become normal arrows. And predating a lot of the more well-known fitness features in games during the Wii era, we have a fitness counter. You can activate it before you play and it'll track your supposed movement and convert that into tracking your weight loss, or something. I can't imagine it's particularly great at what it does though, and I'm not about to do a 1-year analysis to find out. Interestingly though, you can set it to count every arrow that comes by, or just the ones you hit. Rejoice people who miss everything but still exert the effort. Mario Mix is nothing special. It's DDR, it's simple, you know what you're getting into. And unless you really love that gameplay, it'd be hard to say this is an unmissable experience. But even then, from what I've seen, people who love DDR don't look highly on the title either. Seems like it's considered too easy to be worth people's time. So I guess it really finds itself in a strange position, being just a strange oddity of Mario's history that's not too worth going out of your way for. And I mean, I had fun. But it'll probably stay stuck in my cupboard unless I want to show it to a friend. Or to remind myself I'm not cut out for DDR before I spend money at an arcade for the upteenth time. Might as well throw it out there, as it's my usual deal to play games here in Japanese, and this was no exception. If for whatever reason you find yourself with a Japanese copy, it's completely playable with zero proficiency. DDR is an international language, and the dialogue and menus in between are just filler at the end of the day. There's some practice to be had if you so desire and aren't put off by the superfluous story. Probably best saved for a marker of how far you've come rather than a learning experience though, at least in my books.